Hey guys, welcome to episode 10 of the Mise-En-Sesh podcast. We've somehow done 10 of these. My name is George, his name is Elliot, and yeah, 10 episodes. That's pretty insane.
10 episodes,
That's
10 weeks of high quality tangents and other assorted video content.
just a lot of procrastinating, pretty much. But yeah,
And not a single copy strike,
somehow.
somehow. My other podcast had
Somehow.
9 episodes. Well, in its first 9 episodes, it had 9 copy strikes.
That's quite impressive. Actually, no, to be fair, I think on the very first episode we did have a copy strike.
Oh, we did, but that was that didn't really count because that was just an admin issue.
Yeah, it's because the sound, like the music or whatever we use on the intro, got flagged as a copyright thing, but like I have the rights to use the music, so I just said, well, here's the proof, and they took it down. Not took it down, they took away the strike. But yeah, so 10 episodes. Pretty good. Anyway, what has happened this week in film and TV? Well, I mean, the big thing I've been aware of is the re-release of Justice League. Yeah, the Zack Snyder release. For those of you who aren't aware, Justice League was the DC film released in 2017. It was a direct sequel to Batman vs Superman. And it was originally directed and being shot by Zack Snyder. But due to tragedy in his life, he stepped away from the project. And he was replaced by Joss Whedon, who then went and did massive reshoots at the same time that Mission Impossible Fallout was being shot, because there was a whole issue with Henry Cavill and his mustache. But Zack Snyder has then come back 4 years later with all of the stuff he originally shot and has released it in a 4-hour film, it's a great watch. If you haven't seen it, honestly, do go watch it. It's very good. The main thing which immediately stood out to me is it's in a 1.33 to 1 aspect ratio, which essentially means it's a square. It doesn't fit a regular screen. Yeah, because you haven't seen the film, but normally you watch things it's a 2.35 to 1, I believe, is what anamorphic is, which essentially means it's significantly wider than it is tall. So for every frame down, or for every pixel down, it goes 2.35 pixels across, I believe is how that works. So that is the regular letterbox format you'd be used to watching films in, and it is a rectangular presentation, which is why most screens are rectangles. The 1.33 to 1 aspect ratio that Zack Snyder released the film in, there's no black bars at the top and the bottom, but they're down the sides. Because I was trying to explain it to someone. It's very strange, because essentially in a regular, like if it was presented in a regular way, you'd have more on the left and the right hand side of the frame. But because it's been presented this way, it's been shot with IMAX in mind. So like when it's blown up, it looks amazing, like on a big IMAX screen. But it means you've got a lot more space on the top and the bottom of the frame. It's like, without being able to just draw it, I don't really know how to describe it better. But it's like a lot.
It's not being shot in traditional widescreen. It's being shot in like almost as like a square. So
yeah, it's being shot with an IMAX screen in mind.
Yeah, so it's
yeah, because when things do reopen again, it will be released in IMAX, where it's a 4-hour film, and it's literally got chapters. So after like chapter 3, I think there are 5 chapters or 6 chapters, and then an epilogue as well. So I think the plan is, when it's being shown in cinemas at like chapter 3 or 4 or whatever, they will literally have an interval where people can go to the toilet, go get snacks and stuff.
I miss those
that's
days.
How big a film it is.
I think I was watching.
I do miss going to the cinema.
Lord of the Rings: Return of the King had a intermission when I watched that for the first time.
That's a 3-hour film, isn't it?
A bit over 3 hours, yeah.
Yeah,
And the,
Do you,
the the director's cut's like 4.5 hours, I think, something like that. I can't remember. It's really long.
do you remember when films, if they push like an hour 45, that was too long?
Yeah.
It's like no one ever sat through that. And now it's like 3 hour films. Yeah, all right, cool, whatever. But I don't think I actually paused the film once. I just sat there for 4 hours and
Well, the
just
thing
watched
is,
it.
like with the whole like culture of binge watching shows on Netflix and stuff, now sitting down for to watch 4 or 5 hours of stuff isn't as big of a ask as it was, sort of 5, 10 years
Yeah.
ago. So like,
I feel like it would be a lot more to ask if you're watching it in a cinema.
oh
If you
yeah,
didn't have that
for sure,
interval, it
yeah.
would be very tough because obviously at home, because I'm watching it essentially on this screen, sat with my headphones on. If I need to go to the toilet, if I need to go refill my drink, I can just pause it. Whereas in the cinema, obviously, if they pause it every time someone needs to go to the toilet or wanted a new drink, they'd be pausing every other second because obviously so many people across 4 hours are going to need to get up at some point. But yeah, I don't really understand why he's released it like that. Like, I appreciate he's got IMAX in mind, but then I also saw Avengers Endgame on IMAX, and that was released in cinemas in the regular aspect ratio, like the uh like the widescreen aspect ratio. So I don't totally understand it, but
Perhaps it's
after about 5-10 minutes, you just get used to it.
perhaps it's like a gimmick to sort of give it a USP of sorts. Like if it's going to be released in IMAX when cinemas are back, then like it gives you a reason to go and see it again, if even if you
Mm.
watched it at home, because you get a new experience watching it in IMAX.
What did seem, what jumps to mind for me is, have they just like accidentally released an ITV version of it or something, like an Instagram TV? Because it's like, imagine, yeah, like that would fit perfectly on an
I
Instagram
mean,
thing because
there's
it's a
also
square.
another factor is that it could well just be like they didn't have the time or the budget to edit it for both aspect ratios, because obviously they'll reframe things to make it fit the aspect ratio better. So maybe it was just a case of like you could do it in regular widescreen or you can do it in IMAX. Choose, and they just chose to do it in that one.
But
So
this was, so all of this was shot in like 2016, 2017.
yeah,
Um, and Joss Whedon used some of his footage. So unless they've literally cut the top and the bottom of the frame off and just stretched it out so it fits that like widescreen format, I don't know how they've done it. Like, yeah, it's one of those things like you'll have to watch it and then like yeah, you'll be able to say what you think. But it good film. I really enjoyed it. I think it's much better than the original release we got. But then what makes it really suck is the fact it clearly sets up for sequels, very clearly sets up for sequels, which most likely are never going to come. Because bear in mind, this film was again shot and meant to be released in 2017, and now 4 years later is when they're releasing this cut. And that's literally like Warner Brothers didn't want it to be released. Apparently, it was AT&T who are the parent company of Warner Brothers. They just went straight past them and went, "No, you're releasing it. Here's the budget, whatever." But yeah, like they reshot scenes and the re like as in they shot new scenes to put into this cut, and the scenes they shot are the ones which open up bigger stories of like, oh, you could address this in a sequel, or like, oh, who's that person? And yeah, it's annoying because I just want sequels, but they're probably never going
I
to
mean
come.
it's very likely that it's like it's an experiment to AT&T and to the people who make money off of it, because if you can bait enough people into watching it and then setting up sequels and stuff, you can then gauge demand for those sequels. Obviously, it's been so long since the
Yeah,
original film came out, so the interest might have gone. So by doing this, you can sort of get people interested in what goes on again, and you can see sort of the public reaction to the hints at sequels and see how thirsty people are for the next thing.
I'd love sequels, but the issue is that so Joss Whedon took over the project from Zack Snyder, and Zack Snyder has been very open about the fact he hated the original theatrical release because it wasn't his film. Like they took his concept and totally threw it out like out the window. it was not the film he wanted. Like comparing the two films, they seem very different because there's so much character development for characters like Cyborg and the Flash, which just doesn't exist in the original cut. Even though it was all shot back in 2017, 2016, 2017, it was all shot back then, it wasn't used. Um, but because he was so vocal about his dislike for it, he then released his plan for what the second and third film would have been. Because he was like, well, the film's crap. No one's going to want sequels based off this. And even if they do, they're not going to come back to me, are they? So he released his plan. And you can see in his cut, those ideas are being set up and they would then be addressed in the second and third films, which he'd planned. Um, but yeah, it's annoying because we've then been teased of like we could have had this, but like Warner Brothers. I don't like saying that Warner Brothers pushed him away from the project because he was dealing with something like his like at the time his like he had a very personal tragedy and he I think Warner Brothers looked at it and went right, well he's not thinking about the project totally, so we'll push him to the side and we'll get someone else in. They got Joss Whedon in who yeah, not a great film. Um, but yeah, like it does just suck because I'm a huge fan of superheroes. I love the superhero films, grown up with them, as have the majority of our generation. And then to have some, it's essentially like the Russo brothers having Infinity War and then being told, oh, before we release it, we're going to get someone else to go and reshoot stuff. Even though you've planned for Endgame, we're not going to give it to you. And then they release the concept of like what Endgame would have been a couple of years later, and everyone turns around and goes, "Why the hell didn't we do that? Why did you not take that approach?" So, yeah. Anyway, right. Too much bitching about this bloody film.
Rage over.
Right. Speaking of Endgame, the highest grossing film of all time, it overtook Avatar until about a week or
Yeah, I
two
saw
ago
this.
when Avatar retook the top spot. And I respect the fact that Avatar is now the highest grossing film again. I appreciate that, but it's because China re-released it in cinemas. I'm like, I feel like that's kind of cheating. It's had its heyday. I feel like this shouldn't affect it anymore. But yeah, again, I'm just a massive fan of superhero films. But then also, I can see why they've re-released it because you've got two. Is Avatar 2 coming out next?
Yeah,
Is it
I
this year or
think
next
it
year, I
was
think?
originally scheduled for this year, but I don't know how it's been delayed by uh,
Yeah, I wanted to see what
coronavirus
that's
and
like.
stuff. It might have been pushed back to next year, but I'm not a
Avatar 2.
Avatar 2 insider, so I can't.
Yeah, December 2022.
Oh,
So that they filmed Avatar 2, 3, 4, and 5. They filmed stuff this year, which won't come out until about 2028.
that's mad.
That's so they're never going to see this for another 7 years. That's ridiculous. This stuff is just going to sit on the cutting room floor for 7 years before it's released. I don't understand that logic because the CG, it might look great, but in 5 years' time, it might look so crap in comparison to what is coming out then. I don't understand the logic of shooting four films to be released almost 10 years later. It just doesn't, I don't get that. I don't see it. I mean, maybe it's just cheaper to have everyone for a set, like they just say, right, you have been booked for 2 straight years. You can't do anything else for 2 years. So, like, maybe that's just easier. I don't know. Maybe James Cameron is planning on just taking a 10-year hiatus. I don't know. But yeah, I don't get it. I don't understand why
Well,
you're filming
it
stuff.
depends what the story for Avatars 2, 3, and 4 are, because if it's, like, let's say you release like this, there's four films or like a trilogy or whatever, and it takes X amount of years to shoot and edit it and release it, and then you have to wait a little bit to release the next one, even if it is ready, because you're not going to release them straight away, because why would you do that? you like a lot of time can pass and a lot of things can change. Actors get older. Actors decide to walk away from stuff. Actors get other opportunities and stuff like that. So depending on whatever I don't know what the story is for Avatars 2, 3, and 4, but it might well have been a case where you wanted just to get it all in the can and just deal with actually releasing them later on. Like,
I appreciate that, but filming 4 films, like, because Avatar 2 comes out next year, Avatar 3 comes out the year after, Avatar 4 comes out in 2026, Avatar 5 is 2027 or 2028 or something. I don't like. See if they
again,
have
well,
actual
like
release
think of
dates.
like Lord of the Rings when that was shot. They filmed all three of those films together. So when like the first film was being released, the third film was already filmed. They shot three films together for Lord of the Rings because that just made sense for them with their locations and the stuff they needed to do to make those films happen. It made sense to shoot them all in one big chunk and then just release them as they're ready.
Yeah.
So like again, I don't know what the ins and outs of the new Avatar films are, but I can imagine there's probably a very logical explanation for shooting them all so close
But
together.
it's the fact that the original Avatar came out in 2009.
So,
Avatar 5 will come out almost 20 years later. Like, why did they not just release
well, when
Avatar
you say
2 in like
they
2012 or
filmed four
something?
films, did they do that after Avatar 1 came out, or did they do that a few years ago?
No, they've done this recently. Uh,
But again, it could be a case of they had the resources and the people and the right things to come together at the right time, and they might have had only a finite section of block of time where they could get everything they wanted the way they wanted it. So they just film it all in one big chunk and then worry about post later on. Like if you're planning 4 films, if you're going to film them, then release it, film it, then release it, film it, then release it, that's going to take a lot of years, and things can change in years, you know. So I don't really take as much offence to it as you seem to, but it's
well, no, I'm not taking offense to it. I'm just so confused as to why they're doing it
I
like
don't think it's quite
this.
that confusing at all. Like think about it, if you want to shoot 4 big blockbuster films, like it's going to take like at least like a year or so to actually film the stuff, maybe like half a
Yeah.
year to a year to edit the stuff. Then you have
Hmm.
to beat the drum, get the hype up, then release the film, then cash in at the cinema, and then it will go out of cinemas, and then you've got to cash in on all the merchandise and DVD sales, and then you've got to beat the drum to get hype for the second film to come out. That process itself can take like
Okay.
3 or 4 years.
Okay. Sure. But I've just Googled it. Apparently, they're planning on releasing them every other year.
Right.
So essentially, either way, there's like a 3 year gap between two of the films, and I don't get that. I don't understand why they've planned that. Between 3 and 4, there's meant to be a significant amount of time, and I don't understand why. That's what
Well,
I'm so
but
confused
between the
about. It's
releases
like
or between the stories.
the releases.
Well, again, it's it's a simple thing. Like if you release films too quickly, the hype isn't there. You have to wait for people to start to yearn for the next one. Like
But then is a year not enough for that?
no, I don't
Because
think so.
between Endgame,
Well,
like Infinity War and Endgame, there was a year.
think about it, like blockbusters. They typically come out at the sort of start of summer, don't they? That's when like the big like
These are all pre-Christmas. These are all December
oh,
releases,
that's
which is what
weird.
they planned for. Yeah,
That's strange because like December time is usually when like the lesser films usually end up coming out.
all the Christmas
Yeah,
films
Christmas
come
films
out.
and like
Yeah,
comedies and stuff like that, and then like blockbusters usually come out sort of May to June time, don't they?
in the
Yeah.
summer. Yeah, when people actually want to
Okay,
be out
that
and
changes
about.
things. But again, like usually like the cycle of like blockbuster releases is they'll release it in the summer. Everyone goes to watch it in the summer. Like, oh my god, it's amazing. It runs in cinema for however long it needs to, and then it dies
Yeah.
down, and then the DVD release comes out just before Christmas, and everyone buys it for their friends and family for Christmas, and then the merchandise and things sort of takes part Christmas to the next summer, and then that's what Lord of the Rings did. Like
Yeah.
Lord of the
Well,
Rings,
apparently everyone's getting Avatar merchandise for Easter.
yeah. Well, Lord of the Rings, they filmed all three films at once, and then they released the first film, and then obviously they released it on DVD and stuff, and then they also released games. Obviously, it's different now. Films don't have games as much anymore, but they have a series of things to release, and if they release things too quickly, you don't have time for people to sort of be thinking, oh, I wish the next Avatar was coming. Like if you just watch Avatar 2 and then by the time you've sort of got over Avatar 2, Avatar 3 is there, you're like, oh, okay, I'll watch Avatar 3, or maybe I won't. It becomes less of a big deal. But if you give it time in between releases, then you naturally, even if you weren't a massive fan of Avatar 2, if you waited 3 years to find out what happens in Avatar 3, you're going to go and see it. But if you only had to wait 1 year, you might not be that bothered enough, and you might be like, oh, I'll just wait till it comes out on DVD or whatever. But when you've waited 3 years to know what's going to happen, it's like, oh, I have to go and see it.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, that would make sense if they had a massive cliffhanger. But I kind of worry that at the end of three, or between three and four, however long there's going to be, it's meant to be significantly longer than the other breaks. But I worry they're just going to wrap up the story, and then four's going to pick up oh, look, here's a new thing. That's what I worry is going to happen
I doubt it
because
though, because
yeah, no,
everything ends
I've
on a cliffhanger these days. Everything ends on a cliffhanger.
yeah, it's because they need to set up for
Yeah,
sequels. They need to be oh, look, there's another one coming. We
yeah.
promise.
The power of pre-established franchise and fan base is now so overpowered at this point that everything,
Yeah.
literally everything, ends on a cliffhanger. The news ends on cliffhangers these days. Like if you go on Netflix and watch something that um and watch just a film, it probably ends on a cliffhanger. It probably does, apart from Netflix originals. Most,
Or
yeah,
rom-coms.
rom-coms. But most films, most big sort of blockbuster films, end in a way that could be continued, like most new ones do.
Well, it's because then they want to leave the door open, say if the film is successful enough. But what is hilarious is when they so obviously leave it open for a sequel. They essentially cut it off mid-sentence, but the film is so crap that they don't get the chance to do a sequel.
Yeah.
That's what's hilarious. I don't know. Yeah, I'll probably be when the films are coming out, I'll probably eat my words and I will go and see all of the films because I remember loving Avatar when it was in the cinema because it was this whole big thing. But at the time we didn't have anything about a sequel. So then going to see two and knowing that to have the payoff of something set up in two, I'm gonna have to wait 6 years. I'm going to be in my 30s by the time the last one comes out, and that is just a horrible thought. I don't like that thought. But yeah, my God, I would have been
Was it 2009 when
I
it
would have
came out?
been 12 when the first film came out. Yeah, 2009. I would have been 12. I will be 30. I will be 30 or 31, depending on when the film comes out. If it's 2007, 27 or 28. So that is
I can just see
three
the existential
decades
crisis
of my
forming behind
that
your
is
eyes.
across three different decades. I'll have been watching these bloody films.
Yeah, three
That's
decades,
oh
3 generations of kids that are, the people who watch the first one, our age, is a strong chance that a lot of them will have kids that are old enough to understand the second one, and then if they keep releasing it, then you've got all these different generations that are all going to go and pay money to go and watch the film. So
Avatar came out the year that my sister was born. My sister was born 2009. So that means that when this next one comes out, she will be 13. She'll be a teenager. That's how long a difference there is between these films. Oh my god, that's
I'm not sure if your issues with the films or if it's just your issues with the growing
it's
old.
the time difference, I think. Yeah. I don't know. I guess it's the same way that Marvel have turned around and gone, this is our like 5-year plan for the MCU.
Yeah.
Like they've revealed that they've got characters like Moon Knight and She-Hulk and that. But like I'm pretty sure they've cast She-Hulk. But I don't even know if they've cast Moon Knight officially. I think there's a rumor of it being Oscar Isaac, but we have no idea. It's that early in development. It's literally like, right, we've got the character, make a cool story. Right, tell them everything, which is not a fat lot. Like, because obviously they've got so much time to work on it. But then they are releasing stuff. Like, the amount of Marvel content we're getting this year alone is very promising for what's going to happen. Because we've just had WandaVision. We're now in the Falcon and Winter Soldier period, and that's 6 weeks. We've then got Black Widow. We've then got Loki. We've then got Shang-Chi. Oh, I did know this. We've then got Hawkeye, uh, then got Eternals, and then possibly got Miss Marvel all this year, which is insane. Like that's amazing to think about. And then James Cameron's like, yeah, look, I've also got 4 films I'm going to release at some point over the next decade. Yeah, I don't know. It's a weird. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I don't even know anymore.
Just watching you melt down right now.
I'm just having an existential crisis at this point. I will be in my 30s when that film comes. Oh, for God's sakes. I'm getting old.
Yeah, well, like I had a memory pop up on my Facebook, and it says like, oh, 10 years ago today, whatever. And it popped up. It was a picture of that I took of my 2 friends. We went paintballing together, and I took a picture of them and obviously posted it to Facebook. And it popped up today saying 10 years ago today, and I was like, oh, okay. And then I realised that that picture was taken like a month or two before we left school. A few months. So I was like, oh
Oh,
wait, it's 10 years this year that I left school. Old.
well, it's weird because I think, oh yeah, 10 years ago I was like 9 or 10. No, I was in my teens. I was
Yep.
14 10 years ago. That's
I
that's
was
a
15 10 years ago.
yeah, you're old.
Yeah.
That's yeah, that's weird. Wait, but would we be if your birthday's August? Or is
August
it
the 8th,
September?
1996.
So you would have were you like the youngest person in your
Yeah, I
year, or
was
were you
really
the
young.
oldest? Really?
Yeah.
Okay, so you would have been the school year above
Yeah.
me. Okay.
So show me some
Yeah.
respect or I'll steal your football. Kick it onto the roof. Do you have that in your school? Like the people from the year above, they if they wanted to play football and didn't have a football, they'd always go to the year group below and take their football. It was like a big thing at our
Our
school.
school,
Oh, you went to school in London though, so you was too busy like stabbing each other and rapping and stuff.
I wasn't even cool enough to do that. I was so awkward in school. It was actually like we'll have to do a whole episode based on school, but it's nothing to do with film at all. But I could go on for ages about how awful my school was. Like not my school experience was just because of how awkward I was. It was bad. Jesus.
And
That was a very
and so
awkward
ends the
touch.
existential crisis section of this week's podcast. Tune in next week to see.
Have an actual meltdown. Yeah, right. What else we got? Okay, this is the thing I was thinking about yesterday, actually. So we all know, and I'm assuming people watching this as well. I say we all, both of us, and watching this, will know that the first iteration of the twist of "I am your father" or "I am a parent" figure was Star Wars. That was the big one.
Yeah,
Like
that's the
at the
first
time,
one
that
that.
was
Yeah,
so groundbreaking.
I don't think it's the
But
first film
is
ever
there
to do that, but I think it's the first one that did it
no?
on
But
the
it's the first big.
first
It's the
mainstream
one that
film.
did it on that
Yeah.
scale. Yeah. Is there going to be a point in time where people turn around? So say like 10 years down the line or something. My sister, if my sister's got kids in 10 years, that's It's a bit young. So okay, 20 years time, my sister's kids. So they'll be what I don't know however old at that point. Are they going to turn around and say, "Oh, Star Wars, oh, it did this obvious twist. Oh God, they just copied the original." Like, is it going to be chucked in with all of the copycats who have obviously based it off the Star Wars trope? Like, is it going to be forgotten as the original one to do it? Is what I'm trying to say.
Is it going to be forgotten? I think it,
Not like the film won't be forgotten, but it will just be sort of blended in as like all those old films who had the same traits.
yeah. Well, it's yeah, like it's how it goes. Like the longer films are being made, the less original all films become because there's more and more films being made, and
Mm.
there's more and more plot twists and character tropes and stuff that's being used more and more frequently. So so yeah, like I'd argue that the whole like I am your father thing, that's probably on its way out of being like a fresh twist already. But I don't. Again, it's not like it's a different thing. Like if a character discovers that another character is their parent or whatever, like I don't think that's gonna sort of be like become like this cliche thing because it all depends on how it's done. But obviously, if a film in 20 years' time has like the lines "No, I am your father," then obviously it's gonna be like such a blatant copy of it. But it's finding new ways to do the same twists.
Yeah.
So like this is I can't remember who said it. It was like some like well-respected film academic person that I read some of their stuff when I was still at uni, and it was like originality is dead. It's been dead for a while.
Mm.
Originality in storytelling has been dead for like 1,000 years because nothing that we tell now hasn't already been told in some form. Obviously, it's different when you narrow it down just to films, but like every story has already been
Yeah.
told. Every story is just a sort of a rehash of a different story, and that's fine because that there's only so many plot twists that exist. So
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. If you come up with a whole like a brand new plot twist, that's it. You've immediately hit a gold mine. Because if no one can see that coming, you've hit a gold
yeah, like
mine.
if
But
you,
because so many variations of stuff, the chance of you coming up with something which hasn't been done to some variation is so slim.
yeah, like the Star Wars, like it was 19. I want to say 1974 when that. No, but that's Empire Strikes Back. 1983. I want to say Empire Strikes Back.
77 was A New Hope.
Yeah, 80
Uh,
81. I want to say for Empire Strikes Back in that case.
no. 83 for Return of the Jedi,
Uh,
and Empire Strikes Back is 80.
I was close. I was closer than someone of
Yeah, not,
my generation probably
not
should
close
be.
enough.
But you think of that time. So was it 1980? That's like obviously you studied film. I don't know if people watching this will have studied film quite the way me and George have. But when you look at films that are like different decades, like the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, the difference in the way that films are made and the stories that they tell on films, it's like a quantum leap every decade. And you think
Mm.
about 1980, you're only 20 years removed from 1960. Well, obviously big maths, but if you go and watch films in the 60s that were made in the 60s, like they are, they're like it's I don't know how to describe them, but they're so different to films that we know now. The stories are so much like
Well, it's because they didn't have the budgets to do anything big and
yeah, like
expensive, did they? It
it
was,
wasn't like it
yeah.
wasn't all about like these big set pieces and setting up these big plot twists and stuff. That's not what it was about. They just sort of told the stories of people doing stuff. Um,
Yeah. Like they didn't
so
have VFX to
yeah,
rely on. You had to
yeah,
have a
like
good
when A New Hope
story.
came out, that was mind blowing. Um, well, I wasn't there, but people who were there, everyone always says how like when A New Hope came out, it was absolutely mind blowing to see like ships in space and planets explode and
Mm.
stuff. And these days, A New Hope, as much as I like as much as I like it, the CGI doesn't really hold up that well, but to be
No.
expected.
Well, was it you telling me that when the film was first in cinemas, George Lucas actually went on holiday during the original like
No, that
box
wasn't
office
me.
release? Where it was there was a thing like when the film was released to the public, he went abroad because he didn't want to deal with the criticism. He came back to obviously people raving about this film because he was like he didn't expect it to do as well to the point Alec Guinness, I think he had a was it like it was like a 2%. What is the term? It's like they make revenue off the box
I do know
office.
the term, but I can't remember.
It's like a backdoor payout,
Yeah,
something like that. I don't know what it is. Essentially, Alec Guinness was offered 2% of the revenue at the back, like at the back end of the film. So the box office payout. And there was for some reason, George Lucas wanted him to do something, and he was like, "Oh, we can offer you another 0.5%." So you took out from 2 to 2.5%. And Alec Guinness was like, "Yeah, sure, whatever." I didn't think anything of it. And then obviously the film was
exploded.
huge. The
Yeah,
amount of money it made, 2.5% doesn't sound like a lot, but 2.5% of
hundreds
like
of millions.
what? Say like a million. Like 2.5% of 1 million, what is that? Like
Yeah,
25,000? Just there. And the amount of millions that that film made. It's the amount of money that 0.5% difference made is insane.
yeah. But like at the
Like,
time that film came
yeah.
out, and it was so groundbreaking. But these days we see stuff in space like like back then it was just crazy to see spaceships and everything in a
Yeah.
film. And now, like, yeah, you can go on YouTube and there's probably some short films with. In fact, yeah, you go on YouTube and there's a guy who doesn't live too far away from me. He made a Star Wars fan film. I think I sent you it ages ago. It's not very good, um, but the it has like passable CGI for spaceships
Mm.
and stuff like flying in from space, and and that's now something you can find on YouTube. Contrast that back
Yeah.
into 1970 whatever when New Hope came out, like absolutely like crazy.
It blew people's
Yeah, and
minds.
it
But
came out at a
it's
time where like car chases were still filmed in front of a projector screen with the actors going like that
yeah.
on a static car. So to go from that to then into space, whatever. But
Well, one thing that big budget films have allowed is that like VFX have got so good to the point that we can have totally CG characters blending seamlessly with real life
yeah,
like characters, which is amazing. But it has also made it so that if your CG isn't quite passable, you will get ridiculed for it.
yeah,
And I'd say the same can be said for like set dressing as well. I'd say if you don't do your like if you do your job immaculately, if you do the best work you could ever do, no one will ever notice. But if you get one thing wrong, if something is not quite right, that's it. That's essentially the
yeah.
end of
Well,
your
it's
career.
like the as good gets better, bad doesn't get worse. So you can do your, let's say like you did your job, 10 out of 10 in the 80s. Like now the standard
Yeah.
is much higher. So like now it's not like your job is still, it's not even like it's rated out of 10 still now. It's like, it's the upper limit for how good things can be just keeps getting higher and higher and higher. So
Oh yeah.
it's not like a 1 to 10 scale anymore. It's like a 1 to 40 scale now. So what was 10 out of 10 back in 1980 might be like, well, it's 10 out of 30 in like modern days, which is like obviously not very
It's
good.
not
Yeah,
great.
but it's just
Yeah.
that's what it is. But getting back to the will things like "I am your father" become these like tired old cliches? Yeah, every cliche is tired and old, but it's more responsibility, not responsibility. It's more whether or not you can find a fresh or semi-original way to execute that cliche, because everything is a cliche when you think about it. Like everything is, but obviously there's different ways of using cliches within your story. If you execute the "I am your father" moment within like the context of your story and it works for that story, then I don't think it's gonna be like, oh, that's just a copy of Star Wars or whatever. Yeah, because
Yeah,
if you do it right, you don't think about it in the context of film history. You think about it in the context of that story.
yeah. No, sure. Um, what is it? Because there are, I don't think it's bang on every 10 years, but it's like the villain of a story. You get tropes when it comes to time periods in terms of like the early thousands was zombies. Then the 90s was like robots. The late tens is like
Yeah,
aliens kind of thing. It's the villain, like the typical villain, changes depend like every 7 to 10 years. And it's quite interesting to watch that unfold because it's like you get one film which is somewhat successful. So I think when did the original Terminator come out? Was it the nine? It was 91 or
yeah.
something.
It was early '90s.
Original Terminator was 84.
'84 was it?
So
But
yeah,
here's the thing though, like what makes a movie villain is it's sort of a reflection of insecurities in society at that time. Like think about the '80s. That's like the dawn of computers and video games and stuff like that. And computers have started to become more and more uh, prevalent in different areas of society, and technology and computer technology is advancing faster than it had ever previously. So the questions were like, you know, what is the limit for computers? Like, how smart can computers get? And then, you know, as a result of that, there you go. You got Terminator, which is a walking, talking computer, human slaying machine. It's
yeah.
and early 2000s. I'm not really sure where zombies came from. I can't really pick out. Um, Actually, no, I
Because I could
can
see
because
zombies.
in early 2000s we had SARS virus. And in lots of zombie films, it's usually a result of like a miracle.
A
Like
virus.
I Am Legend is like late 2000s. I think 2008 that film came out, but that was a as a result of like a cure for cancer that turned everyone into zombies. Um, and then
2007.
2007, far off.
Plus.
But then at the early 2000s, the zombie films usually it's like a virus, something or some kind of infection that's or obviously an infection that's turned everyone into zombies. So if you look at what happens in the world in the early 2000s, um, SARS is the big one, but there was quite a few smaller epidemics. How how topical for us to bring that up. And like 2010s,
Yeah.
sort of space travel didn't really have that much of a boom, but we went to Mars. We found water on Mars, I think, in 2010 or 11.
No idea.
And
So yeah, because space travel suddenly picked up in like the tens.
yeah, like
Yeah, like Gravity. When did Gravity come out? That was 16,
uh, I,
was
no, I
it?
think it might have been earlier than that because I remember my college tutor talking about it. So it might have been 2015, maybe 14. Because I
Oh,
left college
2013.
2013, is it?
2013. Damn.
Yeah, like, well, if you look at like space's influence, like in the 2010s, um, you had the end of the shuttle program. You had that incident where there was an astronaut on a spacewalk outside the International Space Station, and he had a water leak inside his helmet, and his
Mm.
helmet started filling up with water as he was outside the space station, and then he got covered, his eyes got covered in water, so he couldn't see anything. So he had to do like a blind. He had to traverse the space station. He wasn't connected to anything. He had to do that blind, and then
Yeah.
that obviously stirs up the pot for oh, what can go wrong in space?
Yeah, it's not like he can really just sort of open up his visor,
Yeah.
can he?
So you can see how people see that on the news, and then screenwriters they'll be like, how bad could things go in
Yeah.
space? And boom, 2 years later, you got
Gravity.
Gravity
Yeah.
comes out.
Yeah.
And we sent, I
Well,
think in the 2010s as well. I'm sorry for going off so much space stuff, but I'm quite a bit of a nerd. But in the 2010s, we went interstellar for the first time. We sent a probe out,
that's
and
true.
that finally left our solar system. And boom, you've got a film called Interstellar. Literally, like there, we found water on Mars, and then we've got alien films. It's
It's true.
interesting when you see
Yeah.
the parallels
In
between.
the late noughties, we had just Paris. It suddenly started to fold in itself, and boom, you've got
Yeah.
Inception. Quite impressive. But do you know how many original stories there are?
I mean, I imagine the actual number is hotly debated by people, but I guess there is a number. But
Original story premises. Top of your head.
I don't know. I mean, there's. It depends how vague you are.
So if you're going very vague,
I mean, very vague.
so it's like you're literally just
If we're
you
going
can just
very vague,
boil it down to one very,
yeah.
very
If we're going very
obvious
vague, I'm
trope.
gonna. There's less than 10.
There are
Yeah.
seven. Do you want to take a wild stab at any of them?
Thing is, I listened to an audiobook a few months ago, which literally listed every single one, but I can't really recall what they were. It was Save the Cat by Blake Schneider. I do recommend
I've heard a couple of
I
that
do
actually.
recommend listening to it.
Um, right. So the plots. So seven original plots, which is mad. You've got overcoming the monster. The protagonist sets out to defeat an antagonist force, often evil, which threatens the protagonist and/or the protagonist's homeland. So then examples of this are things like Star Wars, Attack on Titan, James Bond, Jaws, Magnificent Seven, uh, War of the Worlds, and Dracula. Then got Rags to Riches, which is well that one out. But the definition of that is the poor protagonist acquires power, wealth, and/or a mate, loses it all, and gains it back, growing as a person as a result. So examples of that, you got Cinderella, Aladdin, Jane Eyre, Great Expectations, uh, David Copperfield. Then got The Quest, education element of this. Got the quest, which is the protagonist and companions set out to acquire an important object to get to a location.
Lord of the
They
Rings.
face temptations and other obstacles along the way. Examples of this are Lord of the
Hey.
Rings, Monty Python and the Holy Grail, and Raiders of the Lost Ark. Voyage and Return.
I'm still kind of
Are
Lord
you
of the
ready
Rings.
for that?
Voyage and Return.
The
Interstellar.
protagonist goes to a strange land, and after overcoming the threats it poses or learning important lessons unique to the location, they return with experience. Examples of this: Peter Rabbit, The Time Machine, The Hobbit, Alice's Adventure in Wonderland, Back to the Future, The Lion King, Gone with the Wind. There's quite a few of them,
Interstellar. Thor Ragnarok probably falls into that.
probably. These are the examples of Wikipedia, so you're probably able to think of way more. You've just comedy, just comedy. Light and humorous character with a happy or cheerful ending, a dramatic work in which the central motif is the triumph over adverse circumstance, resulting in a successful or happy conclusion. Booker stresses that this comedy is more than humor. It refers to a pattern where the conflict becomes more and more confusing, but is at last made plain in a single clarifying event. The major of romance films fall into this category. Got Midsummer Night's Dream, Much Ado About Nothing, 12 Nights, Bridget Jones' Diary, Sliding Doors, Four Weddings and a Funeral, and The Big Lebowski. Then got Tragedy. The protagonist is the hero with a major character flaw or great mistake, which is ultimately their undoing. Their unfortunate end evokes pity at their folly, and the fall of a fundamentally good character. So then you've got Bonnie and Clyde, Citizen Kane, Caesar, Macbeth, Oedipus Rex, because I've heard of that one, Dorian Gray, and Romeo and Juliet. And then last but not least, Rebirth. An event forces the main character to change their ways and often become a better individual. Pride and Prejudice, The Frog Prince, Beauty and the Beast, Snow Queen, Christmas Carol, Secret Garden, and Groundhog Day. So they are the seven original plots.
Yeah, and anyone
And
who
then,
disagrees, if you break down the core components of whatever your favorite films are, I can almost guarantee, actually, no, I can absolutely guarantee that they fit into one of those categories.
100% guarantee it will fit into that
Yeah,
one of those seven categories.
like it just does.
Because my favorite franchise, I don't know if you can see back here, is Harry Potter. Harry Potter, and you've got Avengers here. But literally off the top of my head, the first Deathly Hallows Part One is Voyage and Return
Yep.
or a quest. It fits into those two very easily. I think in Rags to Riches, what have we got? Well, Harry Potter again, Rags to Riches. He's very, very poor. All of a sudden, he's given all the wizard money in the world. It's great. Overcoming the monster. No, I can't. I can't think of anything in Harry Potter where there's an evil force. I can't think of anything. Like it fits all. Like any film you can think of will fit at least one of these
Yep.
criteria.
And if you've got
Um,
an idea that doesn't fit into any of those, then it's probably
then, my lord, you've broken space and
yeah,
time.
or it's probably just not a very good coherent idea. Like
All
yeah,
that. Yeah. Like it is really weird to think about any film or book in general. This also applies to books. Any story you have ever seen is just a
it's all been done before.
different
Yep.
combination of those plot points.
And there's nothing wrong with that. Like
It's
everything that
yeah.
exists and ever has existed is all made up of the same atoms here on Earth. So it's the same thing with stories. All the components that make up your favorite stories, they all exist. They've all existed before and after your story comes along. Like
But it's the fact that anytime you are thinking of a story, if I said to you, think of any random story, like just start spinning a story in your head, you will be looking at anything you've ever seen or read
yep,
before as inspiration. So you are taking the best bits of your favorite things, trying to cram them together, and you're trying to find a coherent story. So the reason why everything fits all these different criterias is because when these were all first written, they had they literally defined what was the seven original plots, and then it's just different combinations since then. I don't even know when these were first written, like the original seven
I
plots.
think it
But
was just after the Bible. I think.
oh yeah, the Bible's its
See, well,
own plot.
this is like a big issue that I think we talked about this before, but it's like how when like beginners or like student filmmakers they try so hard, they're like, I'm original, no one's ever had this idea before. Gah, I'm a genius. No, shut up. It's been probably been done before. Like, not to discredit anyone's ideas, but it's probably been done before. And if you try too hard to make it different, you end up straying away from the fundamental principles that make a story work.
Well, in our freshers week of university, so in our first year, there was a it was like mandatory stuff we had to attend, which was essentially just getting to know your
I did not
tutors.
attend.
I kind of wish I hadn't, to be honest. But there was a thing called Link Dog, which were we like all of our course, so film and TV, media studies, and there was another course, I want to say like photography or something. Um, Essentially, all the media courses were all put in a room together. You were given there was a random number on your seat. I think it was between like a 1 and like 12 or something. You had a random number, and then you were put into smaller groups of like 8 people, and you were told, right, here's a map. This is what area correlates with your group. You have to go film something in this area. You can't stray out of it. You have to film something in this area. Anything you want, anything at all, and come back here and present it to us. And then we had a screening later that day, and ours just happened to have part of Steep Hill in it. So we went to university in Lincoln, and there is a hill which is very, very steep, and they just called it Steep Hill. But obviously, being very new to the area, we none of us knew about this. We were just like, oh, there's a really steep hill. So we did a whole story based on the fact that people were struggling to get up the hill. And then we presented it, and we were like, oh yeah, no one's ever done this before. This is hilarious. And it was Jack and oh, I can't remember who else it was. But they literally sat there and they went, right, and pulled out checklists. They had like bingo cards based off the tropes that people normally do, and Steep Hill is Steep was one of them. And it's like anytime you think you've done anything original, chances are it's been done before in some variation. Like,
Yeah,
could you
and
imagine the amount of times they've gone there, they've watched the same premise of people struggling to get up a hill because
yeah,
that's
and
what's there.
that's not to like. It's important to say that just because things have been done before, that's not to discourage people from still doing the stuff they want to do and telling the stories they want to tell. Because everything is like the concepts and the sort of the building blocks are all the same and they've all been used before. But it doesn't mean that you can't tell your own unique story using those building blocks that have been used thousands of times before.
Yeah.
So anyone, our precious viewer watching this, don't take this section as like, there's nothing, there's no such thing as true originality, so there's no point even trying. That's not the point at all. It's more sort of accepting and realizing that any idea you come up with has probably been done in some variation before, and there's a reason why lots of films there's a reason why films fit into these seven categories. It's because these categories are the is what makes films work. Like if you don't
Yeah.
if whatever you're planning to do doesn't fit into any of these categories, then there's probably either something majorly wrong with your idea or your understanding of your idea.
Yeah. It's the same as like a successful story has to have three
Yeah.
arcs. It's like if it's a standalone
Well,
story, the first arc is where you're setting up the character, you're introducing your audience to the character and explaining who they are and what they do. The second arc is them discovering something or them overcoming some obstacle, and the third part is them then realizing they can do something, they've overcome the obstacle and they're finding it, or they've fallen down, like they've hit a hurdle or something in the second arc and they're redeeming themselves in the third arc. It's like you need to have 3 points in your
yeah.
story where something happens.
Yeah, because like if you don't like three like saying talking about the three acts, the arc, think things that make an arc is if you don't have an arc to your story, it's not a story. It's just something that happened.
Yeah.
Like if I made a short film and I dropped my pen and it ended, that's not a story. That's something that happened.
Mm.
And let's say, and just to expand on that, like if you had a story that then I dropped my pen, it went down the stairs, and then the camera pulls out. I'm in a wheelchair. Boom. There you've got like a big conflict, and then you have this setup for a character in a wheelchair to get down the stairs to pick up a pen. And
Kind of curious as to how they got up the stairs, to be honest, but
well, that's that could be addressed in the sequel. But that's like someone dropping a pen. That's not a story. Someone being in a wheelchair, again, that's not a story. That's just something that is, or that's what it is. But then you put things together, then you've got a story. You
yeah.
know, it's what it is. So if you're like sat in like your first year of film production and I'm going to imitate. No, I'm not going to imitate. I'm going to reference someone who we both know who I'm talking about, but I can't say it because it's PC. If you're going to sit there and think that you are the Odin's son of film and television, and that your idea is so astonishingly new and original
Yeah.
that you're not going to bend from it because it has to be done this way because it's original and it's probably don't work. Probably doesn't work.
I mean, you say I know who you're thinking of. About five people all came to mind then.
Yeah, like I'm sure like a good 45% of film and TV students or enthusiasts all probably start off this way. They think I'm going to be the first of whoever I am.
But I think the trope we fell into is we felt like we needed to have a twist or we needed something to shock the audience at the
Yeah,
end, which is where our third film went downhill because we didn't just follow the thing of like an old man, he's on medication, blah, blah, blah. We had to have this big twist,
yeah.
which didn't work in execution.
No,
But it's then,
like looking back on that film, like it was my directorial and writing debut. But I have no quarrel in
yeah,
saying that film failed. in every single aspect of what I wanted it to be when I first wrote it, it failed.
Yeah.
And when you look back on the final cut, I mean, granted, the editing is something that tanked it. We've talked about that before. Um, but that film, to me, I watched that, and it's not really a story to me. It's just a series of things that happen,
Mm.
and that's what happens when you try and overcomplicate your story to make it like more impressive or more sort of groundbreaking because you think, oh yes, I'm going to do something no one's ever done on my budget or something like that. You end up doing
Yeah,
lots of things poorly, whereas much better to do one thing really well.
there's no point trying to tell a very overly convoluted story if you yourself don't really even understand it. You're just trying to find ways to connect different points. But if you took something very simple, like someone dropping a pen, but then you shot it in such a standout way, like you had really obscure camera angles, you had like really like dramatic music or whatever, just a very over the top way of shooting it, but it's a very basic plot. It'll work a lot better than say if you had a very convoluted, very tricky plot to follow, but then you've just got a camera on a tripod in the
Yeah,
corner of a room. Like it's not going to be as entertaining.
this reminds me of God. It was months and months, maybe even be over a year ago now. Um, but this might make me sound a bit insane, but oftentimes this is back when I used to drive for like 6 hours a night. Back when I used to do deliveries for my parents' Chinese takeaway, and it was like a open air thought experiment. I would talk out loud to myself about whatever it was that I was trying to understand, and I was talking about story structure. And again, it probably makes me sound a bit insane just driving around talking to myself. But I'm guessing more people than you think do it, and if not, I guess I'm just weird. But it helps
Yeah.
me. It helps me understand things better when I say it out loud because obviously in your head you can sort of make things work because your brain wants it to work. But saying it out loud, like a good example is like we had a call a few days ago when I was trying to tell you about story ideas and saying them out loud. Admittedly, I was exhausted, but saying them out loud, I was like, God, not making any sense. But in my head, I knew exactly what was going on. So saying it out loud helps you not only understand it, but also like helps you explain it to other people when the time comes.
Yeah, you're right.
Um,
You do sound
yeah.
insane. Yeah.
So, but the sort of I was thinking about. I think I might. It might have even been over a year ago. It might have been like 18 months ago. But I think I was thinking about a film idea, and I was sort of stripping back, and I was like, what is the core like? What makes a story tick? And
Mm.
in this, I had like a thought experiment, and in this experiment, it's like a film, and I had a character. I think I named him Michael for whatever reason, and it was like Michael is sat in a shopping centre. He's thirsty, and I was like, it was Michael sat in a shopping centre. He's thirsty. He goes to a vending machine and gets a drink. You've got the character.
Hmm.
You've got the conflict, which is being thirsty, or no, sorry. You've got the character, and you have a need. You have a want or a need. Being thirsty is a need. You need to drink to not be thirsty anymore. And you have the resolution, which is the vending machine. He goes there, gets a drink. And that in itself, if you film a character sat down, standing up, walking to a vending machine, pressing a button, getting a drink, that's not really that interesting. But then you can easily make something that is just something that happened into a story because he stands up, goes to the vending machine, say he's not got any money. He's got no money from the vending machine. So now he has something to overcome. He has to go and find some change. You can go anywhere
Yeah.
you want with that. And I think the direction I went with that was he went to like a busker and he was like, mate, can I have some of your change? And the busker's like, if you sing this song with me. And then it was like, this Michael dude, he's like, okay, I'll sing a song with you. And then it's like a big hidden talent and he sings this amazing song. And everyone's like, well, that's incredible and stuff. And he just takes his change, goes off, goes to the vending machine, gets a drink. In principle, the same thing has happened in each of those ideas. Like a guy was thirsty, a guy got himself a drink. But just by adding in some sort of conflict for that
Yeah.
character to overcome, that goes off onto a completely different thing that makes it into like a story that's relatively interesting.
Yeah, if you add hurdles,
Yeah,
then you have to add a reason or a way that they get around a hurdle, which then expands your story. Because if you then added the thing of, say, like he finally gets his money, like he's got this amazing talent or whatever, goes to the vending machine, and the one drink he wants isn't there, it's like then he's got the thing of like, but I want this very specific drink, and he has to go somewhere
and
else.
that's
It's
the
like
twist
if you
ending that
start
sets up
adding
the sequel.
obstacles, um, the vending machine series. Um, yeah, if you keep adding obstacles, then your character will have to adapt and overcome the obstacles. Like
Yeah,
they have to if they want to
and
pursue,
like a really well
if they
done
want
film,
to advance in the
really well
story.
done film, it sets up obstacles which force the character to overcome specific flaws within themselves. So
Yeah.
again, the vending machine thing, goes to the vending machine, doesn't have change, goes to the busker. Perhaps, obviously, he sings this song and it's really good, but perhaps the character has stage fright or like anxiety and stuff. So now you have this
Mm.
fundamental like weakness in the character, which they then have to overcome, which adds more depth to that character. Like you don't feel any
Yeah.
emotional attachment to a guy to watching a guy go and getting a drink from a vending machine. That's not emotional at all, unless maybe it is. You know, everyone's different, but there's not a whole lot that's inherently emotional or inspirational about a guy getting a drink from a vending machine. But then you establish this stage fright, is this anxiety that he's got. He then has to overcome that, and all of a sudden you've got these hooks that draw you, that bind you to this character, and it sort of becomes like an actual. You actually have sort of something invested in that character because you see them struggle and overcome things that you can probably relate to.
Yeah. It if you take any film, you can essentially burn it down to a character wants, needs, or is doing
Yeah,
something, which then pays off in the end. Anything in the middle can be removed, and the story will still be totally what's what I'm looking for. It will still make sense.
yeah, it'll, yeah, like
Um, yeah, like if you were able to just take the beginning and the end of a film where the character sets up, I need this, and then at the end of the film they get it. You smush those two bits together. If you ignore the fact that there's a time jump or whatever, the movie makes sense. The thing which makes successful movies work, though, is they keep adding reasons as to why that character can't go get the vending, like the change or whatever. They add reasons as to why it's a difficult situation where they can't do that, and that's what really makes good films stand out because they don't just keep throwing different obstacles which could just easily be overcome. They throw something where they have a very specific need in order to overcome that obstacle they need to get past. And that's why some films stand out because off the top of my head, Endgame, Avengers Endgame, the only way to bring back like essentially what they're trying to do is bring back everyone they've lost. And at the beginning, that's what they say, this is what we're going to do. And at the end, that's exactly what they do. They bring back everyone they've lost. But then they're presented with the thing of, right, well, we'll go get the Infinity Stones. Okay, this is where he is. Right, we go there. Oh, he's destroyed them. Well, then what do we do now? So then 5 years in the future, and Ant-Man comes trotting along like, hey, right, okay, let's do this. And then the rest of the film is them getting the stones. But it's the same thing of they're presented with the obstacle in terms of all their friends are gone, so they want to get them back. And then they're presented with another obstacle, the stones are gone, they don't exist anymore. Then they're presented with other obstacles and other obstacles, and it's just one obstacle after the other, which they overcome to then proceed to the next. That it's
like when you
yeah,
think about it, it could be like Endgame, the the entire process of them finding Thanos and seeing the stones are destroyed, the entire 5 year gap, them going back to get the main story of of Endgame is getting the Infinity Stones back to then set up the climax.
yeah,
Like all of that, you could just completely disregard that, and you could just start Endgame, and just say we've done time travel and now we're going to fight Thanos, something like that. Like that's what happens. It doesn't change what
yeah,
happens, but the interesting part of Endgame isn't the big final battle, although that's a nice payoff for people who've been invested in the MCU for a long time. But that big final battle doesn't really, like, if the whole film was just that, then it's not really that interesting. But what makes it interesting, despite the fact it doesn't change what happens at the end, but you see how they got to that
Yeah.
point and the challenges they had to overcome. It's
It's the
yeah.
journey.
If you
Yeah.
ever watched a film and this character disappears at some point and then comes back and you think, well, how have they got here, or what are they doing here? Like that's a easy to understand example of the conflict that makes stories work, because you see a character leave, you see them come back at a different point of the story, and you're wondering what they've been up to. That is what you feel like when there is a story that doesn't explain or doesn't give you a reason to go on a journey.
Yeah.
But anyway,
Yeah. I
filmmaking
mean, when
seminar
boiled down
complete.
to it, yeah, when boiled down to just the basics, films are essentially a person getting from their want to getting what they like. They want something,
Yeah,
and in the end, they get what they want, and the middle is just them facing obstacles which they need to overcome
yeah.
to get
Like
to the end.
a journey. A journey is A to B. A story is A to C via B. Like,
Elliot
yeah,
Maris, 2021.
wisdom. It's true though. It's true. It's
Yeah.
true. Like, yeah,
No, yeah. It's a it's an easy thing to get your head around, but it's a very tricky thing to create
yeah,
well. Like making a film is easy. Making a good film is
yeah.
hard.
Like I can make a film in like 5 minutes here, but I can't guarantee it will be anything other than terrible.
It's not going to be box office like groundbreaking. Like it'll be a film. There will be some story within that film, hopefully. But yeah, the things which make good films stand out is you are there for the story and it makes sense. Like you understand why they need to do
Should we
whatever
set
they're
a
doing.
challenge?
Oh
A
God,
challenge
go
for
on
us to
then.
complete between now and next week. Um,
Okay.
let's each get one of the seven um, story types.
Yep.
We'll do it at random, and between now
Hmm.
and next week, we will make a film that fits into one of those story types
Oh God. Okay.
with whatever resources that we have or don't have. Like I don't have time or myself for most of the week, so that'll be quite interesting. I think I have like 2 hours in the evening before I have to go to sleep again before work. So
Okay.
it could be like a 2 minute thing. It could be a 3.5 hour blockbuster if you want. But
Okay. All right, go on then. Do you want to? If you do a random number generator, I'll tell you what number that associates with.
um, shall I not just pick a number at random? Because I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, go on then.
4.
Voyage and return.
Nice.
Yep. So write this down on my little
My
notepad.
trip to the petrol station, the motion picture, coming to you next week.
Right, go on then. Pick one for me.
Are we going to take the one I got out of the equation, or should we leave it in? Actually, no,
Um,
that doesn't make any sense because yeah,
you're
I'm picking
picking
the
the
number.
number. I think you can.
Okay.
Yes.
I've not got a coin, but I've got this GoPro mount, which is sticker on one side and black on the other. So I'm going to do a
Okay.
coin flip with the GoPro mount.
Sure.
Ah, 6.
Tragedy. Okay.
See, that's a harder one to do by yourself, but that's part of the fun.
I've got an idea. I've got an idea.
I'm just going to
Okay.
film myself
Yeah,
because I'm so
I'm down with
tragic.
that. Oh God. Okay.
Challenge is being set.
I kind of hate you for saying this, but
Now,
uh,
see, you hate me now, but this time next week you'll feel all energized and electric from creating stuff.
okay. If you say so.
Anyway,
Uh, all
let's
right.
wrap it
On
up
that
here.
note, should we wrap it
Yeah.
up? Yeah. All right. So thank you for watching this educational version of the Mise-En-Sesh podcast. And if you want to see those two films, which we have to make now, thank you, Elliot, then tune in next week for episode 11. Damn.
Episode 11.
Uh, but yeah, thank you for watching the Mise-En-Sesh podcast. I have been George, he has been Elliot, and we will see you whenever. Goodbye.
Goodbye, viewers.